Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikanta Das, in his statement post the monetary policy review earlier this month, said that inflation was still uncomfortably high even though it has eased from its surge in April. It declined from 7.79% in April to 7.04% in May and 7.01% in June. The governor said that India's inflation trajectory continues to be heavily contingent on the evolving geopolitical developments, international commodity market dynamics, global financial market developments, and the southwest monsoon. July 2022 was the seventh consecutive month when the headline retail inflation remained at or above the central bank's upper tolerance level of 6%. The RBI panel jacked up the policy repo rate by 50 basis points to 5.4% last week as it remained focused on the withdrawal of accommodation to ensure that inflation remains within the target going forward while supporting growth. The MPC stressed that sustained high inflation could destabilize inflation expectations and harm growth in the medium term. The results of RBI's July 2022 inflation expectations survey of households showed that their median inflation perception moderated by 80 basis points from the May 2022 round of the survey to 9.3%. Their 3 months and 1 year ahead median inflation expectations also declined by 50 basis points and 60 basis points respectively to 10.3% and 10.5%. While household inflation expectations have eased, they still remain elevated. Another survey showed that consumer confidence continued to recover from the historic lows seen in July last year, though it remained pessimistic overall. Consumers' perception of the prevailing price level as well as inflation declined from the previous round of the survey. They expect a further rise in prices but see inflation moderating marginally over the next 1 year. According to another RBI survey of 42 professional forecasters, inflation is expected to remain at above 7% in the second quarter and moderate thereafter to 6% by the fourth quarter. So, how much longer should consumers grapple with the problem of high inflation?
So if you ask me whether inflation has peaked, I would say the answer is yes and no both. Yes, probably because if you look at quarterly numbers, it does seem that we have seen the peak already in inflation. For Q1, we saw inflation average at about 7.3%, which was 20 basis points lower than RBI's own assessment. For Q2, we are projecting inflation in the vicinity of 7.1%. Thereafter, we see a dramatic fall in inflation in Q3. So somewhere for that quarter, the average could stand close to about 6.1%. And it is only in the last quarter that we see inflation reverting back into RBI's inflation target band. And for that quarter, we are projecting an inflation at 5.5%. But if we were to look at month-on-month movement in inflation, we are estimating inflation for the month of July at 6.83%. But we do see the scope of inflation monthly readings once again seeing a slight upside for the months of August and September, largely because of a negative or an unfavorable base. Obviously, they will not be as high as the peak that we saw in April. By the end of the year, somewhere around November or December, we could see inflation slip below 6%. And that to us will be an important milestone. As far as monsoon is concerned, given that there has been a fair degree of unevenness in distribution at the state level, especially states such as Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, which are typically states intensive of rice production, have seen, and this is again based on our interaction and anecdotal evidence, that it's the rice sowing which continues to lag since mid-July. Rice could see some downside in production. It's a possibility, but we will see how the rest of the monsoon season pans out. Early days yet to proclaim it as a red flag, but if we do see a downfall, we will be watchful of rice prices.
Crude oil is down by 24% since its June peak, reverting to levels that existed before the start of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. There has been a correction in global commodity prices, particularly in prices of industrial metals, and some softening in global food prices. Domestic edible oil prices are expected to soften further on the back of improving supplies from key producing countries and government interventions. While inflation may have peaked, a relief for consumers is certainly not around the corner. It is not until the end of this year that inflation is expected to fall within the top end of RBI's tolerance band.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.
सब अच्छी दिख रही हैं यार, कौन सी खरीदूं?
ये तो वही बात हुई, 4000 शेयर्स लिस्टेड है, कौन सा लूं?
वो तो सबसे आसान है।
तुझे 5 पैसा नहीं पता?
अब तो सबको पता है। 5 पैसा पर है 4000 स्टॉक्स की रिसर्च, टेक्निकल टूल्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट आइडियाज। डाउनलोड 5 पैसा नाउ।
अब तो सबको पता है, investing made easy and rewarding with 5 paisa. Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.